EP Magazine presents Layla Tamimi and her uplifting story, from suffering a debilitating paralysis and stroke to graduating this past January with honors from Montclair State University. In addition, we focus on vision, hearing, speech, and how these impact the development and education of people with special needs. Read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis. I am your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing Power Washing, and my supporters, Kason Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, and Black Cat Designs. Hey, we're rolling through 2024, off to a fast start. Well, actually, quarter one is over. We're moving right along, and I love it when I get a chance to talk to interesting people. I learn something new every time, and today's guest is no exception. We reached out and connected, and he's an author, and we're similar in the fact that we both have 3 sons. So without any further delay, no more waiting, Jeff Nelligan, author, Army veteran, and we're going to talk about his book, The 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. Welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Hey, Travis, it's a privilege to be on, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being super Gumby and being patient with me, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I got into your book, which we'll talk about, and I'm like, I'm in. I mean, you don't read that much about fatherhood nowadays, especially from a guy who has lived it, and you know, you're writing about it. But before we get into that good stuff, and it's all good, it's all great. Can you kind of tell us, you served in the military and had with a very interesting background, kind of give us the Cliff Notes or summary version or detailed version of what your military life was like, please, sir?
Certainly. I joined late in life. I was 27 I'm sorry, 28 years old, and I joined the Army Reserve, a Pathfinder unit. And I joined because I didn't want to be one of those guys who at the age of 40 says, oh, I should have, or I would have, or I wished I had been in the service. I'd been involved in athletics a lot in my life, and I see that the same ethos in athletics, both in high school and I played college, was the same thing in the military, the ruggedness, being around alert guys who are funny, who follow through on a mission with purpose. So I was the oldest guy by about 10 years at basic training at Fort Benning in way back in 1988. And, I was in pretty good shape and I made it through there. And I was assigned to a reserve unit for a year and a half. And then that unit was DX'd and I went to a National Guard unit with the 29th Infantry Division out of Virginia, Maryland, and served in a MI battalion, and just as, kind of doing everything for everybody, and was on the weapons platoon for the headquarters company. So it was just a great experience. And, it's nothing like the active duty. I have 3 active duty sons, but I know that the active duty is a grind. And I was enlisted. I rose all the way, after 14 years, I rose all the way to the rank of E4, never got higher. But it was the kind of experience that I'm still in touch with a dozen guys from that unit. And that was over 20 years ago. That's how tight we were then, and that's how tight we are now.
So you did this at 27, 28 years old, which, I knew a couple of those guys in the Marine Corps, and they told me that this is a young man's game. So much respect, Jeff. That wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it wasn't. And at the time when I went in, actually, and now I realize, this old mind, I was 29 when I went in, when I started basic training. And it is a young man's game. And at the time I was working for the U.S. House of Representatives. So to be thrust into Fort Benning and having all these guys yelling at me, you really had to, suck it up and take the pain. Whereas guys who are 18 and 19, they're less formed than a 29-year-old man. I was also lucky. I got to go to air assault school out in Oklahoma. I went to this special school, French commando school in Martinique for 3 weeks. And thankfully, God bless, passed both of the courses. So I had those kind of sidelights to the regular work with the battalion. So it was the best experience of my life, 14 years. And I think part of that was, my experiences there were a help and kind of an inspiration to my 3 sons later on.
So before we get into fatherhood and, the books you've authored and what you're trying to do, I am curious because, I served active duty. A lot of people I talk to have, but we never really talk about what it's like for someone in the reserve or guard to really balance their professional obligations and first of all, their family obligations, because, we do this every day, but you all are like, hey, this weekend I'm doing this, or for 2 weeks I'm going there, or we got, called up for a couple months. And then not only that, your family, your wife, your kids, all the other stuff that goes along with that, but also, your professional, aspirations. You got a career you're trying to go to, and they like to see you there. How did you work on all that, Jeff, during that time?
Yeah, you make a good point, because you leave Friday night and you get back Sunday night. It's once a month for guard and reserve duty. It was kind of tough, particularly when the kids were young, because their dad's gone for the entire weekend. And then during the summer, it's 2 weeks, you're gone. The family part was tough. For the job, it was on the kind of jobs I had in politics and House Representatives, and also as an appointee with Bush 41, were the kind of jobs where on the weekend, sometimes they're reaching out to you to get stuff done. So to be away for that block of time, after a while, one of the reasons I did get out, I went to 14, I didn't go to 20, was because I just couldn't get away. I couldn't tell my wife at the time that, hey, I'm gone for 48 hours, and she's got 3 kids. It's just not fair,
Right. you go through this time though, and because this is, 4 lessons from my 3 sons, and that's what we're talking about. And I'll have the link to the book and the website and the Oscar Mike Radio Show post, folks. The website is nelliganbooks.com. And I'm going through this, and I'm like, when did the transition from, you know, working the political spectrum, doing your Army National Guard, Army Reserve duties to author come into play?
Well, I tell you, once you have a child, and just like with your 3 sons, once you have that kid in your arms after 2 hours of birth or something, the first thing you're thinking is what is this kid going to be? What's the long game on a kid? And it's something that's basic to any military, from an E1, to an 06. I got to have a strategy. I got to have a plan, to make this kid get farther than the old man got. And I just wonder sometimes, we were discussing fatherhood earlier, the idea that a father, a mom, needs a strategy that has that long game perspective to it. And in my case, it wasn't to raise a pro athlete. It wasn't to raise, a rocket scientist. It was just to raise a good kid who would be, as the years went by, satisfied with their life and reaching every potential that they had. And so that kicked in, when I was in the political sphere. And then at one point, when I thought we were really reaching a turning point, I kind of left politics and took a career job with the FDA here in Washington.
Let's talk about fatherhood first before we talk about the book. Thinking about it, no one really asked us, and the focus is on the mom, and I get it, trust me. Being in the childbirthing experience 3 times, I can see why the focus is on the mom and the baby. No question, rightly so. But you never really sit there and say to myself, like, did I ever ask, my brothers or my buddies what it was like holding their newborn in their arms? And we really don't do that. I mean, for me, it was like, well, this is mine. This is real. And I can't put it back, right? How do I do this? And it's a really special moment, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it is. I mean, and that's exactly it. A special moment. This is mine. And, you do kind of get advice and comfort from your buddies or from your parents, and your siblings. And that the example that was all of those people set was a driving force in, as I said, the strategy for getting this one kid, then 2, then 3, on this sheet of paper to say, hey, you're gonna do these things because we're gonna train you up. It's like I said, an E1 and an 06. No, you have the plan, you train it up, you go through the tough times, like Debo was saying in one of your earlier, not Debo, Devin Brown was saying in earlier one of your podcasts, the idea of bravery. That is, Eric Prince says, embracing the suck. That is doing things that are uncomfortable. And being a dad is uncomfortable. Being a parent is uncomfortable sometimes. And that's just the way life rolls out. But that idea of fatherhood, being kind of a pushed to the side is not good for society. In fact, it's got to be pushed right to the front and center.
As you went through fatherhood, did you take notes at all? Were you just reflecting internally to write the book, or when did it start, germinating, the seed germinating for the idea to write this book and write about this aspect of parenthood?
I've never been asked that question. It kind of happened. The last kid left for West Point, and I drove him up there, and there was this, big emotional ceremony for most of the other parents. For me and him, it was, hey man, you've been training for this for a dozen years. There's no emotion here. Just get it done. I know you will. And when I came back home, I was literally sitting out on the old patio with a bunch of Red Bulls and a cigar. And I thought, man, all 3 guys, have finally launched. At that point, I had a kid at officer candidate school in the Navy, and I had another kid on a ship, building a ship, the USS Paul Ignatius down in Pascagoula. And I thought, well, now is the time to write all this stuff down. How did these guys get there? Other parents would say, oh, how'd you get these 3 kids like that? And, and then, of course, you look around. We were talking about this earlier. You're looking around at the state of kids today who are 18 to 23 or 24, and you think, oh my gosh, these parents, these fathers, they need some advice, stat, because their kids are not making it happen. And so maybe that's a little bit of vanity, maybe a lot of vanity. And so I just sat out there and wrote it all down, what had happened through all those years. And you make a great point. Yeah, I did take notes. I had kind of diaries of all 3 that I put together in one thing that I started writing when they were in about, oh gosh, 6th grade. So I had all these stories that I'd written down that I went back through. And that's how the book emerged. And, it's a short book, as you know. It's like a 40-minute read, man. It's not some coffee table anchor. So that's the genesis of the book.
I get a lot of younger people working for me. And I hear a lot on the news media, other things, that the millennials, the Gen Zers now, I don't even know, because I'm not that cool. They all are this and that, and they can't do this and they can't do that. And I had to check myself one time. I'm like, the reality is they're this way because of the example and input they got from parents and mentors in their life. In other words, we produced what we're seeing now.
Right. Yes.
So, but we can sit there and offer and change ourselves and get a better result if we want to, right?
Yes. And I think what we see is what we produced. And I think the biggest reason for what we've produced is we've let the culture raise our kids, not us raise our kids. And that begins right with, just the saturation of electronic media, the time spent on phones, on laptops, binge watching YouTube, just that whole universe, which I call the glowing rectangle. The kids now spend, a typical 10 to 18-year-old spends not 8 hours and 47 minutes a day looking at a screen, mostly their phone. And that doesn't include schoolwork.
Wow.
Now, when you've got a kid passively sucking in all this stuff, some of it awful, some of it vulgar, violent, of course you're going to have a kid who can't follow through, can't turn a key in a lock, because their whole life has been this passive absorption of all this stuff.
So I'm reading the book, and you're right. It's a fairly short, concise read, which I'm like, wow, this is different. Usually these kinds of books, I wouldn't call this a self-help book, but I'm going to use that term, and to kind of relate this, can be ponderous to read.
Oh,
not like War and Peace, but not a short, concise read either. But this was short and concise and to the point. I'm like, it had to be a military guy who wrote this, because give me the info and leave me alone and let me go about the plan today. And I want to focus on the 4 main traits that you mentioned right up there, because I'm like, wow, reliable personal conduct,
right,
a confident worldview, grinding resilience in adversity, and expansive ambition. So I saw these, and then everything else cascaded from these 4 main points. And I'm like thinking to myself, if I could get, 3 or 2 out of these 4, like, great, I'd be, well on my way as a parent. And I'm like, darn, Jeff, why didn't I get this book 20 years ago? But let's start with and focus on the 4 traits, because it sets the stage for everything else that comes in the book. And look, folks, the link will be in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, where you can check out the website and purchase the book. Highly recommend that you do. I've enjoyed reading my copy. Thank you very much, Jeff. But let's start with reliable personal conduct. I thought that was interesting because it wasn't like, outstanding or A+ personal conduct, but
Right.
reliability. Now where it's almost like, you know what? Okay, if he's going to be reliably bad or reliably good, I just want to be reliable in their conduct. Kind of unpack that for me a little bit for the Lance Corporal here.
Yes, sir. This, the specialist will do so.
Okay.
Reliable personal conduct, just the idea that a kid follows through, that they're modest in their clothing, modest in their speech, that they know who they are, that they'll greet an adult by shaking their hands, look at them in the eye and saying, "Hey, Mr. Jones, hey, Mr. you know, Sinclair." Just the basics. I mean, my gosh, we all grew up with that kind of, respect for others, which is really an idea of respect for ourselves. And the first thing is, and in this day and age, is show up on time. How hard is that? And that became a driving force throughout all of their childhoods. That we just, whenever the Nelligans had to be somewhere, like I said, in the words of my drill sergeant at infantry school at Fort Benning, if you're 5 minutes early, you're late. And just that simple procedure of being early and seeing what's going to come about and preparing for it and getting a sense of the environment is essential. And then the second thing, of course, following through on a task rather than leaving it, undone. I'll tell you, Travis, the biggest thing that gets to me is parents, and with due pride and with sincerity, are always telling me about how smart their kid is. Smart is overrated. Just follow through on the task, even if it's a C result. Just follow through. And so that conduct is essential, because that's the conduct that every person, stranger or friend, is going to see throughout your life. And if you can get that one right, you're already way up on most kids your age.
And you talk about certain examples with your sons about how this is done and reinforced in the aspect of consistency. So it really set the tone for the rest of them. And, then we go through this one and we talk about a confident worldview. And I got to tell you what, Jeff, out of all of them, I mean, they're all good, but this one really, struck me because I see a lot of, younger people and even older people who lack confidence. And it's not that they're bad people or, not good at their jobs or relationships, but for whatever reason, they're not confident in their abilities and they close themselves up from opportunities. So why was that important to unpack in the book, and more importantly, impress upon your sons that confidence and a confident worldview was important?
Confidence is the key to a way a person, a kid 7 years old, or a kid 17, or an adult 37, handles their way through the day-to-day events of life. If you're confident, you're not going to be scared. You're not going to be shy. You're not going to be uncertain or thrown off balance. And I'll tell you, to build that confidence, Travis, I remember it like in one of the notes that I took many years ago. We were in an indoor shopping mall, and the eldest was 7 and the youngest was 4. And I opened my wall. I took out 3 $5 bills, and I handed one to each of the kids. And I said, "Go get change. You walk away from me. You don't look back. This is not a race, but come bring me back change." In the swirling mall with hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people all around, milling, stores everywhere. And I said, "It's not a race, but just go get the change." And of course, they were excited. This was a task where they had to be on their own. And all 3 of them headed off, and they came back. They struck out at some stores, but whatever, they came back. One kid came back with 20 quarters in his pocket. And the idea was, they did something on their own in the midst of strangers in a strange environment. And we did it again and again and again. And then we go to a supermarket and I say, "You need to get these 20 items. Here's a list of what they are. I'll see you back here in 20 minutes. We'd go to a sketchy area of town to a 7-Eleven, and I give a kid a $20 bill and say, we're going to stay in the parking lot. You go in and get the Doritos and the Gatorade and, get them. That's it. And then come back. Or we'd be in a restaurant and I'd say, you will memorize all the orders and give them to the waitress. Or in an airport, here's all the materials. Go get me 4 boarding passes. So the examples, the tasks increased in kind of responsibility and, seriousness. But these kids, by the age of 8 or 9 could just navigate anything. And of course it pays off now, and it paid off then because they never got spooked. And I one of the examples I mentioned in the book is the youngest kid was 5 years old in a huge mall where they'd been taken for a birthday party, and there was these irresponsible parents in charge, and they went from a food court into a movie theater, and they left 3 of the kids behind, and because they're disorganized. So here's these 3 kids in this massive food court in the middle of this mall, and the 2 kids with my son are crying, and my kid says, hey, my dad once told me when we were at a college football game, if you're standing or if you're lost, you're not tall enough to see anything. Look for the guy or the woman who's got a stripe running down their pants, and that's a soldier or a security officer, and they'll help you. And so they kept looking out. A couple minutes later, they found one, and they went running up to the guy, grabbed his arm, legs, and said, hey, we're lost. And they hooked him up with the parents. But it was such an indication of, here's a kid 5 years old. He's not panicking. He's thinking of a way out, a way out of the obstacle. And so if you've got that confidence, it not only pays off when, things are on the line, but you can walk into a room and decide, hey, I'm not in charge here, but I'm not nervous at all. And I can go talk to this person or that person. So it's essential. And in their current jobs today, of course, they lead dozens and dozens. One kid at one point was in charge of 38 guys on a guided missile destroyer. He has that confidence, to make them work and to, service and operate, 2 $500 million GE engines for the destroyers. So that confidence is key. And you're right, adults don't have it. So it's not only kids, many adults don't have that confidence. It can be learned.
Well, speaking of learning, it's almost like when you're in boot camp or the military where, just keep track of your canteen, then keep track of your M16, and keep track of the go land nav here. You have to build it, is what I'm saying. Confidence is just something you can go down to CVS and buy. You have to build it, nurture it, right?
Yeah. And that's the nurturing that takes place in a platoon is the same kind of nurturing that takes place in a family where you're constantly given more tests, more challenges. There's more obstacles to get around. There's more setbacks that you got to reverse. If you learn that at an early age, it becomes almost muscle memory not to get panicked when the heat's on.
Right. We're halfway through the 4 traits, but just curious, you're a father, you're developing your sons, you're raising them, and they do different things, and sometimes they go off on their own script. It's just what us boys do. But what's it like, starting to you're in the parenting process with them, and what was it like seeing them start to do these traits on their own with no real coaching from you all the time?
I can tell you that, it was gratifying. I mean, the eldest kid's at a party and some guy, and he's 15, and some kids show up who are drinking and everything. Again, it's the muscle memory. I get a call. It's 10 o'clock. Dad, you got to come pick me up right now. I don't even blink. I actually, I remember saying this at the time. I said, Oscar Mike. And I was in the car and picked him up, outside the house. And he said, these guys showed up drinking and the parents let it slide. And I'm worried, the cops are going to come or something's going to happen. And I'm going to have this, big fat red check mark next to my name that I got caught up in this stuff. You know, he had just learned that you just got to stay away from bad people and bad things. And that's why I get this frenzied call at, 10 o'clock at night. You got to come now. And so you see them making these decisions as they go through school and athletics, and later on when they're in college, they don't get caught up doing the wrong things. Again, that it's reflex, this is bad, I got to get away. And so those stories, are abundant, and them making the right decision when, as I said earlier, the heat was on.
Well, it kind of speaks to the next trait you talk about, which is grinding resilience in adversity. And I'm a metalhead, Jeff. I'm like, that'd be a great name of a band or a song, grinding resilience in adversity. And I think that's something that, I've watched some studies where it's like we need to have our children experience controlled adversity to toughen them up and grow them. How did you develop this trait in your sons?
Sure. I use that grinding. It's kind of neat. Every kid and every adult, and you and I know this, no one gets a free ride. Everyone, sometimes on a daily basis, hits an obstacle, hits the wall, there's a setback. And what you want to develop is a kid who doesn't fold like a $3 suitcase and become enmeshed in drama and self-pity and, just giving up. And so when my kids, I was kind of counterintuitive. When my kids were in a tough situation, I usually use the athletic metaphor. On a field, it's the last minutes of a game, and everything's on the line and they're on the field. I like that. I like seeing my kids really, in the thick of things when it could all go south, because I knew that was just that one time, but that one time was going to be replicated for the rest of their lives. And if they could get out of that situation, it gave them strength for the next one. And the biggest thing with and we talked about this earlier too, is setting the example as a father.
Yeah.
One of the signature moments was I had been fired from a job because I was on the south side of an election working for a candidate, and I got fired and I had no job. And we were down doing our usual Sunday at the ball fields, throwing the ball around, the football, lacrosse. And as the usual end of this was, I'd throw a few long passes downfield, the guys would catch them, and then I'd say, okay, let's go get our donuts. So I'm in the middle of throwing, heaving this rainbow downfield to a kid. And I said, hey, we'll go get those donuts. And the eldest kid was just panicked. And he said, Dad, we can't afford that. You just lost your job. And I turned to him and I said, yeah, it's the end of the world. Just in the sardonic kind of, end of the world. Dad got fired. And I said, have a seat in my office at the 50-yard line. I said, guys, yeah, I got fired and things are a little bit tight right now. But you know what? I'll rally. I got you guys. I need to work, on my passing arm, and everything is going to be fine. I said, this is nothing. And they were just kind of dumbstruck, that the old man fired, we're kind of, struggling financially, can just be this calm. And that set the tone for every, obstacle that appeared in the future. And they would say it. It was a way for them it was a release valve for them to get away from, they spilled a quart of milk on the floor, or they had a bad scene with a friend, or they got a bad test, or they're sitting on the bench on a team, that, oh, it's the end of the world. I can get through this. And that's that response to adversity, to just lower the temperature, get normal, get right, and say, okay, what are the three things I've got to do to reverse this? Right. And it was key, because every kid, like I said, no one gets a free ride. Everyone's going to hit those obstacles. If you can approach that reverse with a strong mind and a clear mind, you're better off always.
I love that. I just really do. It just really sums up everything we've talked about so far in a real world way. And that's the thing that I really liked about the book too, ladies and gentlemen, is this isn't some study, Jeff cites. It's, you know, science is good and data is better, but when you have these real world examples, I connected to the book, very closely, especially as a father. The last trait we talk about is expansive ambition. And it just seems like with the arc your sons are on, they started on these little small victories and just seem to be
Right.
pushing themselves to go further in life. And how do you develop that, and then how do you nurture that to keep that ambition going? Because sometimes it's like, well, we can't have them burning themselves out, but by the same token, you don't want them to be stagnant either.
Yeah, I love what you just said, small victories. A lot of the parenting for me, again, the athletic metaphor was, I don't want a long bomb in the end zone. Just move the chains. Just give me 2 or 3 yards, man. That's more impressive on a consistent basis. We go back to the word consistent that Brown used in your earlier podcast. Just be consistent, sustain it. There's no great leaps and great successes. It's all just, like I said, moving the chains 3 yards here and there. For them, in terms of the achievements, I wasn't riding them like a dog. You've got to get all A's, you've got to be, all conference and everything. It was more, I know what your potential is, man. So just live up to it. I'm not going to be banging on you all the time, but you guys, we live in the United States of America. This is the greatest country. You can do anything you want. And I literally said that to him. So I said, your grandfathers lived through the Depression and, ate bread for 70% of their meals. Okay. So let me tell you how tough life can get. You guys have got it easy. So you have to perform in these certain areas. And they did. And I will say, my ex-wife deserves 90% of the credit for how they turned out, because magnificent woman, same kind of values I had. And so they were around two parents, who really walk the walk. And the biggest thing is, I remember we were going to a lacrosse tournament, and we were going to this high-end prep school in New England, and we were there early because, as usual, and we're driving down the opening avenue for the school, and there's these signs up everywhere that says inclusion and justice and, liberty and diversity. And I looked at him, and my kid was looking at him too, and I said, hey man, don't forget SATs, GPA, all state. And he started laughing. He's 10 years old and he's laughing. He gets it. And I said, look, man, obviously you get it. I said, the real world is about performance. That's how I look at you. Your coaches look at you, your teachers, all your peers. Yeah, it's nice to have airy-fairy thoughts, about life, but what life really is performing and getting it done. You're going to play a team in about a half an hour that, yeah, they can be the most woke people on the face of the earth and they can have all the right ideals, but you're grinding and hitting because you want to win. And that's the idea of performance. So that idea of just getting it done and doing it to the best that you can was always ascendant in their minds. And it just carries over. Again, I go back to the muscle memory, the reflex. You start down that path, and, as one kid told me, and this is a classic, this is the middle kid, it's a naval officer. He said, we were talking about stuff, and he says, yeah, Dad, good is not good enough, ever. And I thought, where the hell did you get that, man? It just, that was the way he looked at his, that was his ethos for life. Good, yeah, but it's not good enough. I want to be better than that. And so that's how that ambition kind of shows itself. Also, too, in the book, you'll notice I took plenty of shots at myself.
Yeah.
We lived in and still live in the Washington, D.C. area, and we would, on all our journeys around to everything, we'd go by these massive office buildings and office parks and downtowns and these huge faceless, soulless buildings, concrete and steel. And I remember, we'd see them all the time and we'd make comments about them. And I finally said one time, I said, we're driving by all these buildings. I said, up there on the 7th floor, some guy's sitting in a freaking office or a cube, and he's got a picture of his family on the wall. And he's got this mug on his desk, like you made me in second grade. And he's staring at a screen, and he was going to be somebody. He was going to be a jet pilot, or he's going to own his own business, or he was going to sail around the world, or he was going to go in the business with his cousin, in IT. I said, instead, he's sitting there staring at this stupid screen, and he's saying, what in the hell am I doing here? I said, that's your dad. So you got to get farther than that. And they were shocked. And I said, yeah, that's me. So guess what? You need to get way farther than that. And so that kind of self-examination really has an impact on kids. And they think about it long afterwards, long after that kind of, admission has been made.
So, this is interesting because you read about some parents like the tiger mother or father. I met parents from different cultures who, you're practicing the piano 4 hours a day, you're doing this,
Right.
2 hours a day, you're in the gym, 7 days a week, you're up at 4 in the morning, 7 days a week,
Right.
sleep till zero. I mean, there are parents out there like that and drive their kids. I never got the impression from your book that this was about, you were definitely the dad, you were definitely the authority figure, you were definitely the leader, but you weren't a slave driver either. You weren't, it's different to explain, but you weren't the tiger dad, but you were this beacon of order and expectation in their lives. So I was curious about that because the tiger syndrome came out a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
as a parenting style to emulate, but you're very counter to that, and I'm curious if you could tell me why that is.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. And it's great you bring it up because it is a phenomenon and it's been going on for years. Like you said, the parent just driving the kid like a freaking slave master. It doesn't work for the long term. Like, we started this by saying, I wanted holding that kid, like you were saying, you hold that kid. You want the kid to be satisfied. You want the kid to reach potential. If you're banging on a kid 24/7, play the freaking violin. And if you're not starting in gymnastics, you're wrong. And you better be president of the robotics club. I mean, if you're doing that, the kid's going to rebel. The kid's going to reach a point where he or she either rebels or goes psychotic. With my kids, there was just certain lanes that I wanted them to achieve. And you provide the example of being a good, solid dad who can take shots at himself. And also just through his own professional career can kind of show him, hey, this is what you need to do. But it's the engine up ultimately is in the kid. Yeah. And you can develop that engine through the 4 values that I kind of delineate in the book. But the kid's got to buy in.
Yeah.
And if the kid has minor successes, i.e. moving the chains over the course of his month and year and week and day, then he's going to ascend, he or she is going to ascend to that, that kind of capabilities that they, realize the potential, so to speak.
So one of the reasons I kind of bring this up then, one of the things that you really point out in the book is the aspect of humor.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that, you're not kidding. You take, you're self-effacing, you take shots at yourself, but it's all under this undercurrent of humor. And, one section stood out to me. No, the light touch is always memorable. No kid responds to lectures but kids do respond to a gag, a one-liner, or a quip. It will be remembered with kids. It means it will be repeated over and over again. And I grew up in a very hierarchical, top-down authority structure, reading and writing and arithmetic, all tuned in with the hickory stick kind of upbringing.
Yeah.
Spare the rod, spoil the child. Humor was not it. So
Yeah.
I'm like looking at this one. I'm like, what if I had done that as a dad? A little less Marine Corps, a little less, that, and a little bit more humor. What would I have gotten otherwise? I had never really thought of it that way before. And of everything in that book, I think about it now as an adult. I get more out of people and my team with a joke than I do with
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
why is that? Why is it that you have to be funny, but a lighthearted quip at the right time reaps rewards when you feel like taking them to the woodshed, so to speak.
Yeah. The light touch, I guess I did write that. The light touch always works. Kids, I tell you, man, even adults, they don't respond to platitudes. I mean, platitudes are great, but they don't have the power. They just become overused and stale. But we had a very loose family. We still do. I mean, we're still kind of light. Well, not light. Let's funny, good natured, and the all three kids were back. This is kind of an example of that lightness. Last Christmas in December, all three kids were together on Christmas Eve for the first time in 5 years. They hadn't been in the same room for 5 years because of deployments. Middle East, China Sea, Hawaii, Guam, Europe, North Atlantic. So all three were together for the first time in 5 years in a room. And so all four of us are just, they all arrive, and it takes about 1 minute, and it's just a total yuck fest. Everyone's pointing at each other and saying things, and the gags are just, and I thought, this is like the summation of frickin' 25 years, man, because there's no overbearing seriousness or drama or perceived emotionalism. It's just all, four guys just throwing jokes at each other. And the humor will always work because it sets a kid's mind in that, it can be a loose world. It can be a fun world. There are every environment is full of something that's funny. And so it was gags the whole time. And I'm telling you, the gags still go on. They'll say some of the things you read in the book, they're still saying now, and 20 years later. So it's just a better approach to parenting, in my humble opinion.
Awesome. And the book is 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. I'm with Army veteran Jeff Nelligan. He's talking with me about his book and parenting boys. Do any of these, I have to ask because someone's probably already thinking this, Jeff, maybe they've already asked you, does any of this apply to raising girls? Because I asked because I ran into my brother's daughters, and it was an entirely different experience. Like my sons and I we can grunt at each other literally and get our point across. And my nieces were like, right. Uncle Travis, tell me how you feel. I want to know how you feel. Or the real trap, Jeff, does this belt match my shoes, Uncle Travis? And I'm like, anyway, do the same lessons apply to girls as well? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no question. I mean, and a dad probably can pull it off better than a mom, because I think the maternal instinct is always stronger with girls and moms. It's just going to override. But definitely can, because what you want from a he or a she is just that sunny outlook in life, that confident outlook, And for girls is, really important because it's kind of a misogynistic society, and they need to be able to have that inner strength and that confidence to get over the obstacles they face. And I think they face bigger obstacles than boys. I think the whole social media universe, the frenzy, entraps girls more than it does boys. And indeed, research from Jonathan Haidt in New York University and Dr. Jean Twenge from San Diego State University show that particularly Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat have all had a more deleterious effect on girls from 2010 on than for boys, because girls are more wrapped up in that. So there's definitely, it can be used. Again, it's just to produce that kid that's just confident, can get through stuff and, achieve. The potential in girls is just as unlimited as it is in boys. I'm old school. I think every kid has potential to do one thing good. And if you can find that kid's going to be way better off.
Fantastic. So what is next for you, Mr. Nelligan? Do you have a book you're working on now? Are you looking at doing different things, or is it just, seeing how this goes in life? What's next for you?
I'm thinking of perhaps a book about Gen Z. We talked about Gen Z at the top of the hour, and the idea of how they, what they need to do to succeed in the workplace. My 3 kids are pretty much Gen Zers, older, the oldest of the Gen Z, 1995, 96 birth dates. And something about along the lines of how Gen Z can succeed in this workforce. They do face some pretty, self-inflicted, let me emphasize that, self-inflicted problems. I was intrigued by a big survey done by a HR firm called intelligent.com. It was 800 different HR managers at all levels in all kinds of businesses. And it was specifically on the work habits of Gen Z. And these HR managers who are around these kids every day because they're hiring them said that 58% of the Gen Zers that they interview right out of college are late to the interview. 58%. 28% won't turn on a Zoom camera for the first interview. They won't turn on the camera.
Oh.
They noted that 46% were consistently late to the meetings that the organization had, and that, believe it or not, some 63% were fired before their first year was up. But here's the ultimate there, Travis. You're going to love this. 22% of the Gen Zers who were undergoing an interview for a job at a company brought their parents.
No, come on. No.
Stop the madness, Travis. I'm telling you. Yes. 22% brought their parents to the first interview with the company. And these HR people were, are astounded. But that's what Gen Z is bringing to the workforce. And that's the future. There's more Gen Z than there is any other generation right now alive. It's something like 74 million.
Wow.
And that's your current workforce. And 1/5 of them are bringing mom and dad to an interview for a job.
That's millions.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So that would be maybe the book, but you don't want, I mean, it would be lighthearted, here's what you got, here's what you losers need to do. No, but that would be kind of the next step. I don't know if I can pull it off because, it's kind of hopelessness. But anyways, that might be the next step,
Awesome.
If I can make it funny.
Well, it'd have to be funny. I think you can pull it off. I mean, this book certainly did. So I just can't wait to read it. I certainly enjoyed. Thank you for, getting me this one to read. And again, I'm like, where was this 20 years ago? But also, I think for parents now, it's like, well, how do I do this in this changing world
Yeah.
with all these challenges in it? And I think
Right.
it's very, very concisely laid out. I just want to thank you for coming on with me, Jeff. Any closing thoughts or questions on your side?
No, I want to pick up on just what you said there, Travis. You know, this changing world. Yeah, it's changing, but if you can bring the ethos of the Marines or the Army or the Navy, the Air Force that all of us encountered in basic training for 3 months, if you can bring that to every kid, then boy, this is going to be a better society.
Yeah.
You know, all the things that we learned at in that regimen that we had to go through, and then of course for the active duty throughout their service, you know, those basic values, that's the best thing that the military does. It teaches those values and it enforces discipline, authority with discipline. And there's nothing wrong with discipline. Discipline is good because, like we started at the beginning, discipline works for the long haul. And if a kid has that, boy, he or she is already miles ahead of their peers. So, you know, it kind of goes back to the things we learned when we were in the service, and and your listeners, that those eternal values are we still need to hold on to today.
Absolutely.
in this changing world that you mentioned.
Absolutely. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Jeff Nelligan, Army veteran and author of 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. I have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. Jeff, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing with me. This really adds value to what we're trying to do here. And also, you know, lets parents know that, hey, there's a different way you can do things out there. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's been a pleasure to be on. And I will say that, you know, listening to your C-SPAN interview on Washington Journal back last year's Veterans Day, that's a must hear, a must see for, you know, almost every American, because those are the kind of things you spoke about with the gravity and the generosity. It was stirring. So I want to just make that point.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it very much. And it was a very positive experience. We'll see what happens with that. So again, the website is nelliganbooks.com. Jeff, I hope you come back on and talk with me again about other things. And thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
So this is Travis with Oscar Mike Radio with Jeff Nelligan. We want to thank you. And as we say at Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight.
Remember, on it teaches our mission. We care about it, we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 for Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.